EU-Wettbewerbskommissarin Margrethe Vestager soll die Europäische Union fit für den digitalen Wandel machen. Es ist eine Aufholjagd, denn es gilt, den Anschluss an die USA und China nicht endgültig zu verlieren. Zudem ist es ein Kampf gegen die großen Plattformen wie Alphabet, Amazon oder Meta, die die digitale Welt längst unter sich aufteilen. Eine Tatsache, die immer häufiger auch europäische Gerichte beschäftigt. Vestager will mehr Wettbewerb ermöglichen, damit auch kleinere und mittlere Start-ups aus Europa eine Chance auf den digitalen Märkten haben. Ihr Kampf ist zudem ein Kampf für demokratische Werte. Denn immer stärker wird der Einfluss sozialer Netzwerke auf europäische Angelegenheiten. Helfen sollen bei all dem auch neue Gesetze. Das Gesetz über die digitalen Dienste und das Gesetz über digitale Märkte. In weniger als einem Jahr sollen sie in Kraft treten. Doch wird das reichen? Ist der Rückstand noch aufzuholen? Und können europäische Wertvorstellungen überhaupt gesetzlich durchgesetzt werden? All das fragen wir Margrethe Vestager nun persönlich.
Good morning and hello to Brussels. Great to have you here.
Good morning. Great to see you.
So a big day for you. So let's right start in. A couple of days ago, the Olympic Games started in Beijing. How did you feel looking at the athletes performing for themselves, cut off from the population in a more and more cut off country?
Well, I felt very sorry for them because as an Olympic athlete, you know, you train and you train and you train, and it's so rare, and it's such it's just a thing that you can go there. And then you don't have the buzz of the people. You don't have, you know, everything that comes with that great competition.
So what does this increasing Chinese isolation that we are seeing these days and have seen in the last couple of months mean for Europe?
Well, we have a very complex relationship with China. Because on the one hand side, they are a partner. We cannot fight climate change without the Chinese. It's not doable. We will not succeed. Second, they're an economic competitor because we have businesses out there on the world market who feel and see Chinese competition. And last but not least, there is a systemic rivalry. Because we're a democracy, an old democracy, and we want to remain like that. And with a democracy comes, you know, the starting point of the integrity of the individual. And that, of course, that shapes a very complex relationship with the Chinese.
And there's also the big battle about the tech supremacy between the United States and China. I'm wondering, Europe is not only stuck somehow in the middle between these two tech superpowers, it's also lagging behind in so many fields. So how could Europe's role look like in this power play?
Well, first and foremost, I don't think that we should underestimate ourselves because Europe is a powerhouse when it comes to prosperity, trade, productivity. In some areas of digitization, Europe is very, very strong. Take our abilities when it comes to research in semiconductors or the machinery to produce semiconductors, just to give you two very specific examples. And I think if we see ourselves as the people we are, we could shape sort of a third way between a very, very market-driven society and a very state-driven society. And I think we're getting there more and more. You would see that, I think, both in the CHIPS Act that we table today, but also in how we push for digital rights and principles for each and every one as citizen to enjoy a human-centered digitization.
It's clear that Europe has strengths, but also the business in so many high-tech fields are done somewhere else. So how could a European industry policy look like to find really this third way you were just talking about?
we have an industrial policy, and the goal of that is to enable European industry to lead the green and the digital transition. And, that is, for me, that is much more strategic and much more far-reaching than to say we want to have the global market share XX in this field or XX in that field. No, it's about the role that European industry can play. And, one of the things that really sort of impressed me was in sort of the first year of the pandemic, we didn't know what way it would go. So, we were analyzing, making scenarios. And one of the first to come knocking on our door was European industry saying, don't you waver now. You have made the strategic choice that we should be climate neutral, that we should digitalize. This is what we're ready to do. Mm. That doesn't make it easy, but it shows that there is a community, there is an alliance between politics and industry this year to push forward for these things that are so crucial for creating societies that are worth living in for us as citizens and as human beings.
What you just said to lead the fight against climate change and the digitization, this is somehow always right. But what does that actually mean? So how can this become industry policy? Or does the economy has to solve that for themselves?
No, I think we need to help each other out, in particular because we're in a hurry. Mm. We have very little time to make this happen. So, for instance, decarbonizing production processes, that businesses sign up for that, and that we as taxpayers, as states, can come in and give a helping hand in order for it to happen really fast. Take the projects that we do on batteries. They are quite amazing because, taxpayers' state support comes in, takes sort of the most extreme risk, and that crowds in so much private investment. So we really develop European industry right now, as we speak, the biggest investments globally in batteries, in the breadth of it, is in Europe.
I'm always wondering how much can the European help to build European champions? Is that something member states should try to do, the European Union should try to do, or what is your point of view on that?
Oh, but we do have European champions.
Yes, but we need some more in certain fields, right? So is that something politics should try to do?
Well, it's difficult to say, well, how can you say that we need some in certain fields? Because we have in many important sectors. And I think one should be really, really careful as a politician to think that you can see through what is the real market. We need industry to be the actors here, and we need taxpayers and politicians to give a helping hand. And that helping hand is, of course, to get to the objectives that we have actually set in common, because we live in democracies. So we set our strategic targets in common. But it's really important that we use the drivers of this social market economy that we live in. One of the most important drivers for innovation is competition. That we have learned again and again and again over the decades. So the thing about Europe that makes this place really special is that it's a social market economy, that politics and industry can do things together while maintaining these fundamental drivers. Mm-hmm.
As you said today, the European Chips Act will be announced. Much of Europe's industrial production that depends on semiconductors has been greatly disrupted by the chip shortage in the last months and years. So can you give us the three most important points from this act that will be announced today that we don't know yet?
Well, I don't know what you know, so I'm flying a bit blind here, of course. But I think for me, the most important thing is to enable also small and medium-sized businesses to be part of this new generation of industry, where everything needs a chip and where chips can make so much more value in the business model that you have already. So that we create a new infrastructure based on these super research institutions that we have already, to enable, a design platform, pilot lines, so that many more businesses can come on board for real. Because already quite a number of things are happening. We have the first important project of common European interest in semiconductors already delivering results. The second one, a giant project, I think with 100 businesses and 20 member states already in the pipeline. I'm quite sure that it will improve what we do in the business community. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the plans to establish first of its kind production facilities in Europe to complement what is done already. Because as you will know, a number of businesses, they do produce chips in Europe, specialized chips for manufacturing, power chips that can maintain high voltage, or chips as they do in Spain. You have here actually a European champion producing chips for almost any car key on this planet.
Right, and also in this CHIPS Act, the way member states can do state subsidize will change quite a bit. So how do you look at that? Is that the right way? Because as from what I understand, you've been you had a different position in the past.
No, it will not change. We will not change our rules. We have the rules of the treaty, mm-hmm. Which means that we can look at things like first of a kind establishment of facilities. And the reason it's important to have control of that aid being handed out is, of course, to prevent a subsidy race. So that whatever subsidy is only what is necessary, what is proportionate, and then, of course, to make sure that there is a pan-European benefit from it. Because it would be really ironic if we, by accident, sort of reproduced the global unbalance in Europe, just having a European unbalance where only a few member states with deep pockets had the benefit, and it was not a benefit for this European industrial system that we do live in.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some numbers. I've read about something like 45 billion until 2030. Is that the right number?
I wouldn't know the numbers because they come from so many different sources, and some of them, of course, are not committed because we will not know how much member states would come in with.
Okay, and another question, will chip producers in Europe be forced to deliver first to European companies in times of crisis, like what we've seen in the last 1.5 years?
Well, what we have seen, this extreme situation where there is a shortage, that should be prevented. It's not possible to help this shortage out politically on a sort of in a month or in a year or in 2 years' time. But we can do quite a lot to prevent it from happening again. And the most important thing to prevent it, that is to have international cooperation. Within the Trade and Technology Council with the US, we talk about this, how to fully understand why this shortage came about, how to prevent them in the future, to have agreement with the US, with South Korea, Singapore, Japan, but also as a last resort, if everything else has been done, well, then to say if you are in Europe, if you have been supported in Europe, then you also have an obligation to the European ecosystem.
Yesterday, there has been news around tech regulation, something like the answer of Meta, the Facebook parent company, that said it might have to stop delivering Facebook and Instagram in Europe because of the new data protection laws in Europe. Is that something you are taking seriously?
Well, I don't know how that would come about because Europe is open for business. But the thing is that.
But what do we learn about that? Facebook saying, announcing something like this?
Well, that's up to Facebook. It's their business disposition if where they want to deliver their business. What for us is important is, of course, that when our legislator have agreed on the rights that we have as individuals, rights concerning the data that we produce ourselves, that tells a lot about us. Those rights, of course, will have to be upheld also when data travel. And I think in every jurisdiction it is so that you're welcome to do business if you live up to what has been decided in the democracy that is the governing of that market.
Facebook is also trying to build something like the future of the internet, so-called metaverse. This is also a topic for European regulation, right?
Well, that we have started to analyze, also because the metaverse is here already. When people are gaming and they can enter a universe with their avatar and they can act in that universe, that is already here. So it's not just trying to understand something that will happen in the far future. It is something that has started already. So, of course, we start analyzing, well, what will be the role for a regulator? What is the role for our legislator? Because now, with both the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, our legislators sort of really regain the territory that was usually to some degree left for businesses in the digital sphere. And I think that is really good. And that, of course, should continue also when that digital sphere develops into more and more of a metaverse.
But what exactly are the next steps when you are looking into this particular case?
Well, first and foremost, one needs to understand what is ongoing. Everything we do must be fact-based and based on the information that we can get. So first things first, we need to understand it before we can decide what actions would be appropriate.
Speaking of markets, the biggest topic in European economy are spiking energy prices, especially for gas. Some analysts say the liberalization of the energy market went too far in Europe. Are they right?
I find that difficult to judge, actually. One of the things that has benefited us a lot is the market construction that sort of allows the cheapest energy source to produce as much as possible before the next one kicks in, and then prices are matched by that. Now, when we have a high demand of energy and very high gas prices, it means that every source of energy, also sources of energy that's really cheap to produce, becomes really, really expensive. So, of course, it's important for us to understand, is there something that can be done within that market mechanism for prices to come down? Because otherwise, with the geopolitical situation, there is a risk that high gas prices for quite some time will keep the prices in general at a very high level. And this is why it's not enough just to say, well, we can support end consumers for a couple of months or for 6 months. No, we also need to understand if there's more we can do in order for prices more to reflect the cost of the differences of energy sources.
But what would that be? Longer lasting contracts, for example, something that the EU has been opposing for quite some time.
Well, that is one thing, but then you need someone who would want to sign a
So does that mean this is on the table?
Pardon?
So longer lasting contracts would be on the table from your point of view?
Well, the thing with the contract is that you need a counterpart in order to sign that contract. And that has been part of the issue, that some of our suppliers would not supply more. So what we're trying to do is to diversify where we get the gas. For instance, to have more liquid gas, LNG, coming into our system. Because the point with liquid gas is that you can transport it in these gigantic, very sophisticated vessels, which means that the market becomes much bigger. Because otherwise, you're stuck with the suppliers with whom you have a pipeline.
So the US just announced, speaking of pipelines, they will stop Nord Stream 2 if Russia invades Ukraine. Does Europe need this pipeline?
Well, we never thought that it was of European interest to have Nord Stream 2. That was absolutely clear from the very first plans. I think Jean-Claude Juncker, then President of the European Union, said that in very clear terms. It has been a discussion between the Commission and European institutions in Germany, I think, ever since the very first plans were made. But we don't see it as a pipeline of European interest.
Okay. So, but it would bring cheap gas to Europe, so it would maybe help bring the prices down.
Well, the price doesn't really depend on how you transport it. That depends on your contract and whether your supplier is willing to sell it at a certain price. And there are other pipelines that are not at all used these days. One of the reasons why this crisis may last longer is indeed that the storage has not been filled. And that is really extraordinary and seems to be not a market-driven event, but a politically driven event.
When you talk to entrepreneurs these days, there's another threat to the European economy that not only the energy prices, but also the shortage of labor in so many fields. I was wondering, as a last topic for today, is that something the EU could help, or is that only a case, something to solve for the member states?
Well, you know, our starting point is that we have no competence. Education and skills is competence for each member state. But it is of strategic importance for every one of us. So, of course, we try to help out wherever we can. So, for instance, in the recovery and resilience plans, part of the digital envelope is for digital skills. And we know that it's doable. You know, for instance, in Greece, they have increased the number of citizens with basic skills enormously. And so we're pushing for this. But we're also pushing for expert skills. So, for instance, I have formed a commissioners group in order to have sort of a high-level dialogue with member states so that our level of ability, our skills, what we know of, what we can do, becomes, you know, a strategic sort of heads of state issue, because we get to be fewer and fewer on the European continent, and we need to be more and more clever and more capable in what we do in order to maintain the prosperity and the welfare in our societies.
And how important will immigration be in these plans?
Well, I think that legal immigration can play a very important role, because if people come here legally, it's a completely different thing than when they come here as the victims of human smugglers and crime and put their lives at stake. So the European Parliament has passed the basic legislation for a blue card. So the fundamental steps are taken for more people to come and to work in Europe.
But at the end, we have to accept that less and less people are coming, right? Because there's full employment in so many countries outside of the EU, and population is increasing elsewhere as well. So we have to try different paths, right?
Well, I think it's important that we also are quite capable ourselves, because talking about technology, if we don't have the people able of creating new technology, new innovations, to embody all the innovation environments that has been created in Europe over the last decade or so, well, then we will remain takers.
And also we need big steps in automation, right?
Also that, but also someone needs to create automation. You need to understand how you can reshape production processes, how you can build robots. Also that is eventually human-made. And we need to be able to do that. So to encourage, young people to be the creators also in these areas for people who have maybe one education to re-educate themselves, to use skills from several areas. That is of crucial importance. It's not a soft thing. It's a hard strategic matter to be better at what we do.
I think we can have another talk just about this topic. Maybe we will do this at another time. Unfortunately, our time for today is up. I only say thank you so much for being here this morning and for this interesting conversation. We will talk a lot about CHIPS Act today, more about the future of the economy and the future of Europe. Thank you so much to Brussels. And
it was my pleasure. Thank you.